Suzuki Ingerslev, production designer for Love and Death. I've seen the whole series, and one of my first thoughts about the whole show was there are a lot of sets and locations here. So, how many sets were there total?
It was crazy. It was probably over 100, and we were in Austin, Texas, but loosely based in Austin, Texas, because we shot about 120-mile radius around the city. And my art director, Wes Hotman, and I pretty much lived in a car and drove to location after location after location. And then we actually built quite a few sets as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the show is true crime. It's period, set in the late 70s and in a idyllic Texas suburb. So where do you start when you have to juggle all these elements? Is it just like, oh, we have to go on location and find the right area to shoot in? Is it research?
So working with Leslie Linkaglatter, we were talking, and David E. Kelly, we were like, where should we shoot this? Should we shoot out in the outskirts of Dallas where it took place? But then we realized that, Dallas has gotten so big now that these towns have also grown too. So they're not these quintessential little American towns. And so we ended up finding Austin as our home base, and we found the best towns out there. I mean, it was amazing. Like, some of the towns were actually stuck in time. So it's still a lot of work for us to do, but the bones were there, and we could create this kind of world that we wanted to have our characters thriving in.
Yeah, because I was wondering, a lot of the locations like the motel and even the hotel where Betty and Alan go for marriage encounter, it's like medieval theme. I'm like, were those just you just used the fronts and then you just did a facelift, a facade?
Nothing was that easy. I wish I could say it was that easy, but actually finding those old road motor motels was next to impossible. They don't really exist the way we used to know them back in the day. Like, you used to travel with your family and stop at these amazing places and go swimming, and now they've become kind of people down on their luck, more homeless, more day-to-day rentals, and they're pretty run down, and some of them have even gotten rid of the pools. So we found the Continental Hotel in San Marcos, and it had such great bones. The pool was a little bit sad. The building needed painting. The doors, even when you do a motel now, it's like you don't have the card swabs. You have to go back to key and locks. We had to change out all the doors. We painted all the doors. I don't know, my painter used 120 gallons of paint just on like doors, and it was crazy. It was a labor of love, that one, but we wanted that to be the perfect motor hotel. And then we went to the Como, and that was even in worse shape. The pool had been closed right before the pandemic. They decided to concrete over it. And so we're able to like re-asphalt, repaint some of the building and clean it up, and it made it look so much better. But we had to hide that there was no pool there. So you'll notice there's some greenery around the pool. And I just put some umbrellas on the inside. And then the hardest one was the marriage encounter, the Dunphy Hotel. That used to really exist in Dallas, and it no longer does. So we found a hunting type lodge in Kerrville, and we ended up turning it into like a medieval castle themed. So again, it had that 70s bones to it, with the great old the beam ceilings and kind of the dated brick. And so what I did was I basically did a rendering of what the hotel should look like. And that's all VFX, what you see, that shot of the Dunphy Hotel.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And it was funny because Leslie and Sunday, her AD, and I went to Disneyland right before we left, to move to Austin for 9 months. And we're like, why can't we film it here? There's still these kinds of hotels here at Disneyland, So I got a lot of inspiration from those hotels.
That's true. There's a lot of retro stuff there on the grounds.
Right.
Yeah.
And they still have those themes, which is kind of fun, but that's really hard to find now.
Yeah. So do you look for like 70s specific era armor for the medieval stuff?
Yeah. So
different from modern armor?
No, that we could take from prop houses, from different places. We could rent the suits of armor, and those haven't changed from like whenever they were, the 1800s. So that stuff we could rent and put into our space. So long as the bones of the architecture were there to be 70s, we ended up hanging all those like banners from the ceiling. And we kind of, I had Harry Potter in mind when I kind of did my rendering. I'm like, it's kind of that world of like, it should feel magical. They comment on how strange it is. So we really took the hunting lodge and transformed it into Harry Potter.
For sure. I love when Candy and Alan, or Candy really moves them to the Coma Hotel because it's like $6 cheaper. And Alan he literally calls it sleaze, and he points to the bedspread, which is, I think, red velvet. So
Yep.
I'm assuming the line was already in the script written by David. So when you read that, like, how do you go about looking for a sleazy bedspread? Like, what does something come to mind when you read that? Like, you know exactly what you're looking for.
You kind of do, because everybody has a reference of what that would be. And velvet things aren't like that far removed from being sleazy, back in that time period. And adding things like an ashtray. And then we had those magic fingers. I don't know if you noticed it. Like, they used to do these massage things on these beds that you put a quarter into. It just kind of all added to it. And making that room a little bit dingier made it feel sleazier. So that added to that, bedspread. And the headboard that Gabby found was amazing. So I feel like, all those elements thrown together gives it that kind of dark, kind of sinister vibe. And
Mhm.
while, the Continental Hotel was the opposite, it was just a beautiful kind of traditional bedspread with, lighter walls and just airier and happier.
Mhm. Was it difficult procuring furniture and decor from that era?
I thought it would be. And my decorator, Gabby Villarreal, I don't know what she did, but she found an entire warehouse of like 70s things. So I think we got stuff from, Etsy and from Facebook Marketplace, but also a lot of antique stores, thrift stores in Austin area. And she even had friends that would call her and be like, oh, we have these awful like fixtures in our house that are 70s, do you want them? And just give us something new. So we traded and did that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
And
guess it's also kind of like your parents like saving stuff too, you know. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of that. And I actually like had some 70s stuff left from my childhood. I was really young in the 70s, and I had like little teddy bears and things, and the clamp-on koala bears that everybody had. So I brought those to Texas with me, and I had those in Candy's daughter's room, and old photographs of me and my friends with our hair braided and like the ribbons.
That's why you need to be a pack rat. You never know when they come in handy.
See,
So
thank you.
don't throw
Tell
stuff
my
out.
mom that.
I want to talk
So,
about Candy's and Betty's houses because I mean, as people, they're different. And I think you see that in their homes too, because Candy's is a little bit more open, especially her kitchen where she spends a lot of time, and there's more like color and like liveliness to it. And Betty's is a little bit more traditional and darker, and like kind of claustrophobic too. And that seems representative of her depression and her postpartum. So can you talk about designing both of their spaces?
So that actually worked. That's exactly what you just said,
Okay.
what I was trying to convey, because I feel like they're so different. And, the sets are a character in this piece because you want to understand what happened to these two women and how they were living and what drove them to kind of the situation that they ended up in. So I was trying to get the viewer to kind of make their own assumptions about who they were. And, Candy was, fortunate. Her husband did really well. They had the best in technology at their house. It was a lighter, more open, happy, theoretically, everybody cooks and everybody's happy type of household. Her stuff is more curated. And I feel like she just, has this like more happy colors to her and more open space, like you said. And then you get Betty, who is suffering from postpartum. She's not a decorator. Candy was a decorator. I feel like she came from, a smaller farm community. She probably had hand-me-down furniture from different periods. So that's why it's not all 70s that we have in there. We kind of went back because I feel like her parents would have given her some of their stuff. I feel like she's more the Sears, J.C. Penney shopper from the catalog. And you try to match everything back in the day. And I feel like everybody had that, like in bathrooms, they had the carpet in front of the toilet and on the toilet seat and the cover on top of the toilet. It's just, there were so many like fun things to play with. So I considered her the more matchy, more religious, less sexual. I feel like Candy's house is more sexual, and I feel like Betty's is more repressed. So kind of indicating that through the colors of Betty as well, which were more the blues and the darker woods. And yeah, that's kind
Yeah,
of
for
what
sure. Betty feels like she would just buy like a matching couch or just like a living room set, like the model home set or something.
Completely, because that's what you did kind of back in the day. Like it was cool to match everything, right? When you didn't match things as much, you were just kind of, you felt a little lost.
Mhm.
And then the other big character in this, which is very funny, is plants, house plants. And like we try to put a lot of them into Candy's place because all the research we did on that time period, people had so many house plants. And I'm like, who takes care of all these things? When you water them, they leave rings on the floor. And I'm just like, it's pretty impressive what they
I
did
did
back
notice that they're on like high shelves and stuff. Yeah.
then.
Did you have photos of Candy's home in particular? I'm assuming you had photo reference for Betty's because of the murder.
Well, it's interesting. Betty's house is so well documented on the outside.
Mhm.
And we matched it so close. It was pretty amazing, the house that we found in Austin that matched it. But the interior, I just created any world I wanted to. It was more important that we could follow the script and where the neighbors could come through the house systematically and follow them and unreal or what do you call it, reveal the murder, the way it was written. So I designed that completely different. I don't know what the interior of the house really looked like. There's not a lot of documentation on that. But we thought it was so funny when we got to the laundry room, we had home sweet home there.
I didn't notice that. I laughed.
A little irony sometimes is fun. And then for Candies, I found nothing on Candies. I just knew the community that she lived in. And so I knew that they built the house. I knew that they had money. I knew that they had taste, and I wanted them to be so different. So that is completely, designed out of our minds of like what we thought the character should be. We found the house in Austin, like I always like to do. I try to find the house ahead of time. That way I can build an interior that makes sense, but doesn't match. Like it doesn't match the inside of that house at all. But I like the windows and the doors and everything to kind of tie together.
Mhm. I love her kitchen because I'm like, I want, that much space and like countertop. And that's where she spends most of her time. Like she's always cooking something like
And that's what's so, and I'm so glad that I put so much effort into that kitchen. I feel like we're in there like all the time. And, it's so important for me to have depth when you look down a set. You don't want to just see a wall. So I love that they're always sitting at the counter or at that little table that we have in the breakfast room. Because then you look down the hallway, you look into the living room, you could see the piano and the kid playing piano. And I just feel like that gives you so much.
Mhm. Yeah, I also love when she's like walking up the stairs and like looking out through the window when she sees Pat mowing the lawn too.
And we matched the entry pretty close to the real house. That way, when you're on location, you could at least open a door and see in a little bit. And then on stage, we did a chromatrans or a backdrop that painted the neighborhood outside there. So you could look out those windows too, because it's hard when you have such big windows on a stage.
Mhm.
We were literally in a warehouse in Kyle, Texas. And so we had to build all these in this warehouse with posts coming down. And it was interesting. It was a challenge.
Mhm. Well, the laundry room, how many liberties did you or could you take with that? Like, was there a lot of fidelity to exactly how the layout of it was?
I read the Texas Monthly article. I took notes because they describe it pretty well. And in the book, Evidence of Love, they kind of talk about it. So I had all that in my head. I knew there was a dog dish. I knew there was a nursery rhyme book there. Like I knew all that stuff. As far as the layout, again, I don't know what it was. We had the discussion of seeing the real crime scene photos, and our advisor had said nobody should see those. They're that horrific. And we're all like, okay, nobody else has seen them. Why would we? We're not doing a documentary. Let's just make our own world. So I kind of just did a period laundry room, but then I carefully put in all the elements that I knew that were really there.
Mhm.
And I knew she
Well,
had the freezer because they found
yeah.
the axe marks on it. Yeah.
Um, the back half of the show now, it's like the trial, and Candy retains Don Crowder as her lawyer, and we see his house and his office and a lot of taxidermy pieces there.
I know. We had so much fun with Don Crowder because he was kind of a showman, right? When you read the book, he was all about tanning and looking good and being this kind of, attorney that was successful in the domain that he was in. So, and it was Texas. So we have to bring in Texas somewhere. I felt like a lot of houses I went to had taxidermy, and we're like, this is the perfect person. Like, I don't see Candy having taxidermy. I don't see Betty having taxidermy, but oh my God, we're going to give Don Crowder like so much fun. Like, I don't know if you noticed his desk in his office.
Oh yeah, it's like a museum. Like Like, well, when she goes there at night and there's like, I'm assuming there were lights inside the desk
So,
and it's like lit up.
there was lights inside. It came that way. Gabby found that desk and she's like, "Is it too much?" I'm like, "Oh hell no." Oh hell no, let's have some fun with this. And we built a terrarium inside of it, so it was kind of like, I think there's a rattlesnake, an armadillo, and another animal in there. And we thought, I don't know if they'll ever see this, but how amazing is this desk? So we're really proud of that one. And then I know Warner Brothers prop house ended up taking it afterwards, so it went to a good home and it's going to stay and live somewhere.
Oh my, where did she find that desk?
I think she found it at a on Facebook Marketplace. I think that's the one that she got that. But it was just one of those things. Like I contemplated taking it and I'm like, what do I need with this? Am I gonna really build a terrarium in my desk at home?
Yeah, like how often do you think like when you're done with a project, it's like, oh, this was a cool piece and I want it, but I
Right.
don't have anywhere to put this.
It's an occupational hazard that you
Yeah.
become somewhat of a hoarder, hence all the stuff I have. But I try to curate and make it nice, but you want to save all these beautiful homeless objects. And we had such a huge warehouse full of 70s and 60s, 70s items that you'll never see that much stuff together again. And I was like, oh my God, it's such a shame to disperse this. People were buying it left and right. And the stuff that we found, we had like pantyhose in their original wrappings, we had shoes in their original boxes from like Buster Brown, or it was like actually going back in that time period with our storage area.
Mhm. I think, what you're saying about the desk and you weren't sure if anyone will ever see it. I think this is a case of maybe, editors or, directors, whoever, like they were just thinking of a normal desk, but once they see what you guys found, they're like, oh, we need a wide shot of that.
Yes, and I think Clark Johnson directed that episode, and John Conroy shot at the DP, and I feel like they purposely shot that wide angle so that we could see that, because everybody was just like, "Oh my God, this is so cool!" And the house that we created for him, it was empty, and so we went in there and we added on that leopard skin couch and all those crazy lamps that he had and that taxidermy. So we had a lot of fun with that one. It's a little like every character should be different, right? And we felt like, that defined him. And on a smaller screen, you don't see necessarily all the wide shots. And this way, definitely where you're at. You're at Don Crowder's house.
Mm-hmm. It's also great because we don't really get a lot of him in the beginning. We just see him at the church, really. And it's like, oh, this guy actually has a lot of personality. And I don't think most people are surprised that he hunts or anything, but being from Texas, yeah.
And that's what's so interesting. It's like the show basically becomes the Don Crowder show, like 5 and 6, when he kind of takes over. And so he's an important character. So defining him was important to us.
And then, in the courtroom, I think, that would be the most neutral territory for everyone. So what went into designing that?
So in the script, they go to the modern day courtroom, the 70s courtroom, and the judge likes to grandstand. And so they want to move it to the historic courthouse. So we looked all around Texas for a historic courthouse that we could shoot the interior of and the exterior that worked with the town, because you don't want a modern town around it either. So we were looking, and then we found Georgetown, and it's a great building and the town is perfect. There really wasn't much to do for us there except for signage. And but when you got into the building, it's very hard to shoot a historic courtroom. It was on the second floor. It was tight. You can't control the lighting through the windows, and having all those extras on a balcony was kind of disconcerting without engineering it. And so we said, you know what, let's just build this. So we ended up in our little warehouse in Texas. We ended up building this entire 2-story courthouse. And so we use the exterior in Georgetown, and then when they cut in, you find them on our stage.
Oh my God, incredible. Well, lastly, is there any detail in any set, like any Easter egg that you guys put in there that you don't know if viewers have caught on or like will catch?
We talked about like owls. We had put owls throughout Candy's house, and they're kind of like harbingers of bad luck and stuff and witchcraft. And we thought that was kind of funny. And they were so popular in the 70s, right? So there's that. And then there was a funny story. I told another person that Gabby had found a massage device and put it into Candy's
Nice euphemism.
Yep. And put it in Candy's side nightstand along with her books. So that was very funny. Whether nobody will ever see that, but that was in her little drawer there, a little massage device.
I love that. I love when production designers and set decorators just put stuff in like closets and stuff that will never be on screen, but it just provides.
It's funny.
Yeah,
You
it's
have it,
funny.
so
Yeah, for like the
you-
actors too, and it like helps their character too. So
yeah, and as I said, that the home sweet home, I love that in front of that laundry room. It's just like all that stuff. Like in Betty's house, we had their wedding cake topper from the cake, like all that kind of corny stuff. And the old photos that you used to do, used to like have the shoes cast in iron, and you'd have these photos of your kids drawn, and so it was kind of fun.
awesome. Well, Suzuki, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time and congratulations on the
Thank
show.
you so much. Thank you.